In the process of making this video, I nearly set my woodshed on fire twice, and I actually set myself on fire once. And you know what? I gladly do it all to save you the heartache of perhaps making the same mistakes. Now, this video is sponsored by HelloFresh, and I'll say a little bit more about them later, but first of all, we're going to take a look at this because I have been trying to put together a single mug, ultralight, overnight cook set for a long time, and I finally cracked it, because within this 400 milliliter titanium mug plus the contents, total weight 210 grams, is enough to cook at least one meal and one hot drink. There is a stove in this, there is a lighter in this, there is a spoon in this, and there's enough fuel to boil at least 2 full mugs of water, and we'll take a look inside. Why would I want to put this together? Well, basically I wanted the lightest possible cook set for overnight fast packing trips. This is the sleeve that this comes in, so normally that would be like that and cinched up. The sleeve plus what's in it adds about 9 grams, but we'll take that off. And then in a little plastic bag here, I have a homemade windshield, which weighs, I think, 3 grams. And this is literally made from aluminium foil, like cooking foil, that I rolled over a few times, stuck a couple of kebab sticks on the end of it, and then you can stick that in the ground and use it as your windshield. But let's look and see what's inside the mug. So first off, inside the mug, we have this. This is the stove, and we'll come back to this in a second. We've got a titanium spoon, which I have dismantled. I can just put that back together, like that. We have a small pipette, and this is a glass one. I'm going to swap this out with a plastic one, which will be even lighter. I have a tiny little bottle cap, which I will explain what the reason for that is in a bit. I have a Bic mini lighter, and I've got a Nalgene bottle with about 45 milliliters of bioethanol in it. This is the Vargo Triad titanium stove, and this weighs 30 grams. 30 grams. This stove's pretty cool. You fold out the legs like this. That lets you embed it into the ground. It keeps it super stable. And then you've got little pot stand legs that fold up here. This is called the Triad stove because you can use multiple fuel types in it. At the top you can see it's a standard alcohol burner stove, and on the base here you've got a little scoop where you can burn solid fuel, and we are going to come to a few fuel options later on. Previously, this is what I would have taken on this kind of trip. 100ml gas can and little fire maple stove on the top, and this is really fast. This will boil water in about 4 minutes. I'll full mug of that in about 4 minutes. But the thing with the gas is it is a lot heavier. It's at least 100 to 150 grams heavier for the equivalent setup. Plus it's really noisy. You turn it on and whereas the alcohol is completely silent, allowing you to maintain your peace, quiet and zen. Also, as a fuel, alcohol is a lot cheaper. That one of those canisters could cost you £5, £6, £7, whereas that entire 1 litre of bioethanol cost me £6. To use the Vargo stove with alcohol, what I've been doing is I've been taking one of these Nalgene bottles, which is filled to the absolute brim. This is the smallest bottle you can use that will get you a full fill of this stove. But if I try to just pour this in, it's going to go everywhere. So I use the dropper to put a lot of the alcohol in until I can get a clean pour. You need a pull of about 1 inch on the top. You light it, you put your stove on the top, and then after a few minutes of the heat reflecting back and everything warming up inside, the stove is primed, and once it's primed, you can then see flames coming out of the holes around the side. At that point, it burns much faster. In a completely windless environment, I tested this inside, completely windless, no breeze whatsoever, I was able to boil 3 full mugs, so 350 mils. 1 mug would do me a dehydrated meal or a drink. I was able to take a 4th mug up to sort of stick your finger in and burn it temperatures, which would have been enough for a hot drink. But really all I wanted to get out of this was 1 meal and 1 hot drink. So yeah, this really does the job. It can also use other fuels, and I have different fuels here to try. I've got solid hexamine tablets, I've got the strange fire dragon fuel, and I've got alcohol gel. But one of these fuels attempted to burn down my woodshed, and I would not under any circumstances recommend using it with this stove, and I'll show you that in just a second. But while we're thinking about cooking, let's talk about HelloFresh. to the sponsor of this video. HelloFresh is a subscription meal service where they will send the ingredients for delicious meals to your house. I actually really like cooking, but I'm often too busy trying to get videos finished at the last minute to sort of plan and research new recipe ideas. With HelloFresh, I just go to the website, browse the menu, even just pick based on the pictures and select the meals that I want. They've got loads of recipes on there, from really rich, heavy meat-based dishes all the way over to maybe lighter plant-based meals and everything in between. They've got the works, and they've also got sides and desserts. So then when your order arrives, you've got all the quantities of all the ingredients that you need in sort of pre-made up measure, so you're not going to have as much food waste as you might have normally. So far I've had about 6 different meals from HelloFresh, and I've loved every single one of them. And if you want to give it a try, I can get you some money off. I can get you 60% off your first box, and then 20% off for the next 2 months, plus free gifts. Not exactly sure what the free gifts are, but that sounds good. If you use the code READ60 on the HelloFresh website, or if you click the link in the description, or if you scan this QR code, and you can go and try HelloFresh for yourself. But let's get back to me nearly burning down my woodshed. First of all, I want to explain why I used my woodshed. I want to have a stove that I can safely use inside a tent. So I decided to test it somewhere where if it goes wrong, it'll go wrong badly, and we'll all learn an important lesson. And also the woodshed, while it had sort of 3 walls around the side, it's got an open door, so there is a bit of a breeze blowing through. So I was sort of testing it in a worst case scenario, and you'll see the flame, there is a bit of a breeze on the flame the entire time. So the times I got in this will be much worse than what you would get if you have a really, really dialed in setup, no wind whatsoever. It's just really to give you the confidence of how these things will perform in the worst conditions, because sometimes people test stoves, and when they test them, they only show you ideal conditions, and then you go out and test it and don't get the same results. So this will sort of show you this is what you can expect if it's less than ideal. First of all, I did a quick test with gas, and that was very fast. That was 4 minutes and 26 seconds. Gas, it's fast, but it's noisy and it's heavier. Then I went on to test the fuel block, and one of those blocks boiled me a mug of water in 13 minutes and 58 seconds. And these are really lightweight individually, but there's a major downside. They stink, they smell really, really bad, and also I've been told that these give off like toxic fumes, so I wouldn't be too keen to use this in a tent. I then thought I'd use the alcohol gel, put a blob of it on top of the stove, pretty much as the stove could handle. It burned for 11 minutes and 15 seconds, after which it went out. Didn't boil the water, I would have had to add more, but it left a real mess on the bottom of the stove. I had to clean it off, and the fact that it's so messy rules that one out for me. I wouldn't use the gel. I want something I can just set it up and I can be guaranteed I'm going to get my boil. So that ruled out the gel for me. The tablets and the gel gone. Yeah, and the final alternative fuel I decided to test was these Fuel Dragon tablets. Now these are some kind of stabilized bioethanol. When you take these blocks out, they looks like a block of wax. I had my concerns about this before I put it on the stove, because I could see that the height of it meant it was going to be touching the mug. But I sort of assumed that as long as they trimmed off the end bit and made sure, you know, there was nothing overflowing over the edges, it would be fine. I lit it. It lit very quickly, I will say that. It lit very quickly indeed. I was quite impressed by how fast it lit up. The problem was, after 2 minutes, it started to melt, and then it dripped down the side of the stove and set my bench top on fire. I tried to put it out with a stick. Terrible idea. It's still alive. I'm actually, in some ways, I'm really impressed with these. There was a lot of heat, really easy to light, and I've no doubt these would work in a stove that's more designed for them, and there are stoves out there designed for these. But in terms of using it as an ultralight solution with this, no, absolutely not. It's just too dangerous. So that rules out all the tablets. Essentially left me back to where I started with the bioethanol, and in my worst case setup, as I mentioned earlier, it took 14 minutes to get a boil going on the first mug, and then I was able to get a second mug up to a hot temperature. Ow. One clever design about this burner is that if you fold the legs down, you can then tip it up and pour back most of the leftover alcohol back into your pot. You will lose a bit in drops, but it does mean you can blow it out and recover what you've used, and then maybe use what's left for a second burn. One objection I have with this little stove is that the official instructions say it'll prime after 30 to 60 seconds. In my test, it took 2 to 3 minutes. Now, I did see a few people online saying if you take a bottle cap, put a little bit of alcohol in it, light it, and put it onto the stove, it'll prime much faster. So I decided to test that for myself, and I would no longer recommend doing that in a tent, because I put 2 mils of alcohol in this, which was probably too much to start with. Lit it, put it onto the stove, and in 30 seconds this thing was primed. And it was not just primed. 30 seconds. Ooh, that looks dangerous. So I put it all out, and then I attempted a second time, and the second time I thought it'd be smart and use my finger to drip a few drips on. This time when I put it on, I set my finger on fire. Immediately went and fired. I didn't really burn myself. I just like, where is that heat coming from? Because alcohol burns almost invisible. Yes, the sort of priming boost does work, but it's hazardous. Possibly better to take the lighter and just add a little bit of heat around the edges to speed up the priming time. So my conclusion for this is that I really like the stove, but it's best used with bioethanol. And I would say if you're used to using gas and you've never used an alcohol stove before, practice using this, not inside a tent. Practice using it multiple times before you go out, because it is a little bit temperamental. You can spill fuel if you're not careful, and you don't want to do that. You can set your finger on fire, you could set your tent on fire. You just have to be really, really careful when you're working. But the same applies for gas as well. If you don't use a gas stove properly, you could have a flare-up which sets your tent on fire. But yeah, this is gonna be perfect for me for those overnighters, and I'd love to know what you think of this tiny stove. And I'm not convinced that you'll be able to come up with a solution that's lighter weight than this. So if you do have a solution that's more lightweight, let me know in the comments. And hopefully that helps educate you slightly on how some of these different fuels behave. So yeah, thanks for watching, bye bye, and I'll catch you on the next video, which I have no idea what it's going to be because my edit backlog is wiped. So we'll just have to wait and see what adventures arrive at the end of next week.